and welcome to the 16th Annual Global Women's Rights Forum, where we celebrate the legacies of resistance centered on March 8th, International Women's Day. My name is Taylor Morrison, and I am a sophomore psychology major and child and youth studies minor here at USF, and a diversity education intern at the Gender and Sexuality Center. It is an honor to be your MC for the evening. The Global Women's Rights Forum is a transnational, anti-colonial, intersectional feminist endeavor. We focus on global women's rights, privileging and devoting special attention to the context and perspectives of women from marginalized cultures and displaced communities outside and within the United States. Consistent with the USF mission, the Forum intends to promote and create knowledge that will fashion a more just world by challenging sexist, racist, heterosexist, and classist values and societal structures worldwide. As activists around the world organize and resist the intersecting oppressions that challenge women's autonomy and harm their communities, we invite you to view this forum as an opportunity to engage in global solidarity. Tonight's kickoff event will include spoken word performances by student performers Anju Kasturiraj and Kay Nilsson, followed by a presentation of research by Leah Fessler on hookup culture and sexual politics. We will have a dialogue about how young people really feel about modern sexual expectations, the intersection of hookup culture and feminism, and more broadly, campus sexual politics. Afterwards, we'll finish the event with a town hall-style Q&A with the participants. Before beginning our evening, I'd like to take the time to thank the many sponsors of the forum this year. The events taking place over the next few days would not be possible without the support of our partners across the campus and within the community. I'd like to thank Office of the Dean, College of Arts and Sciences, Institute for Catholic Educational Leadership, University Ministry, Media Studies, the Swig Program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, International Studies, Communication Studies, Latin American Studies, as well as Urban and Public Affairs. I would also like to express gratitude to the Davies Forum, Sociology, History, Gender and Sexuality Studies, Politics, Critical Diversity Studies, Peace and Justice Studies, Philosophy, and the Theology and Religious Studies programs. On behalf of the entire team, I'd like to express an especially warm thank you to the Jewish Community Center of San Francisco. They were immensely helpful in planning, and we are extremely grateful that they were able to bring Leah Fessler to USF tonight. Additionally, we would like to thank the Cultural Center's team, who worked hard to supply the creative energy that has made this event possible tonight. Our first performer, Anju Kasturiraj, is a third-year Critical Diversity Studies and Sociology major, as well as the Intercultural Center's arts intern and host of Lyricist Lounge. She uses her poetry to express her diasporic queer identity, and she just finished her first chapbook, Puppy Shame, which she will be reading an excerpt from tonight. It is a collection of poems that tell stories about bodies, mothers, sex, and identities. She is also working on a photography series expressing the idea of touch and texture between women of color, tradition, and contemporary rituals. She hopes to learn as much as she can and grow and heal with her community. Following Anju's performance will be Kay Nilsson. Kay is a poet and performer currently attending the University of San Francisco. He's performed at a multitude of poetry slams and readings across the Bay Area. He's been featured as a literary performer at Queer Rebels Festival, Radar Productions, the San Francisco Queer Open Mic, The New Shit Show, KQED's Literary Hour with Lit Crawl, the New Soma Arts Center, and was a featured poet for Donde Está Mi Gente, Latino Spoken Word and Poetry Festival. Welcome, Anju and Kay.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Yes. Not sure if I should sit down or not, so I'm going to commit to standing. I'll be reading some excerpts from my first chapbook. It's called Puppy Shame. I just want to say a little bit about the title before we start, just so everyone has context. Puppy Shame is, I took it from an Indian nursery rhyme, and it goes, shame, shame, puppy shame, all the monkeys know your name. And it's funny, but it's also something you say to small children, usually girls, who are not dressed decently. And it's supposed to teach modesty, but it also equates modesty with shame. which we all know is kind of problematic. And yeah, it sounds a lot like puppy love, and join me as we talk about sex and bodies, and I overshare with all of you. Okay. 1. Shame, shame, puppy shame. All the monkeys know your name. Shame, shame, all the boys know your worth. Shame, shame, puppy shame. 2. I am oral tradition. I believe I am a daughter worth saving because my mother has told me so. Stories are all I have, my family's memories, precious heirlooms. I ask the snake, what will become of a childless woman? He replies, what will become of your truth, of the women who love women, of those who are thought to be barren but are full of half-truths, of poisonous fruit? I tell the snake my story about her and her and her. Your secret is safe, said the serpent. Live selflessly. How can I believe you? How can anyone trust a snake? He holds my queerness in his mouth. He slithers back into the ground. The next day, he does not resurface. 3. I asked the boy to tell me his secrets. He tongued the gap between his front teeth, handed me a stone, told me to swallow. Okay, new section. 1. Preservation is done with aching fingers, salt water, and vegetables. Its hair in 2 plates, its knots and headaches, the photo on the shelf of dead things, gold things, of borrowed things, of things that aren't quite alive but never died, neither here nor there. Preservation is carrying 3 generations of women under my ribs. Preservation cannot stop the erosion of holes on my tongue where language used to dance. The bridge between fairy tales and memories. It is forgetting. It is growing up somewhere I've never been. Snapping's nice. Okay. This is 2 parts. 1. I wonder what I taste like. Is that relatable, or is that just for those who are so used to being held between someone else's teeth? When he says my name, he butchers it. He wipes his mouth after. He can't be bothered to stutter. It is crisp, quick. He names me like he names so many others. Novelties on his shelves, the only reason he chose me. I wonder if he wants to taste me again, or if I left a bitterness. It's a constant fear of mine that I am made of poison. To others, it's an elixir. The key to everlasting life is to take, is to conquer. 2. I wonder what I taste like to the boy who went down on me and ate me out like it was the Last Supper. Keeping it Jesuit. To the boy who went down on me and ate me out like it was the Last Supper. He doesn't even try to break me, just serves. We joke, white people this, white people that. Neither of us are joking. Even with a mouthful of me, he states my first and last name with perfect clarity, like a prayer he rushed home to say. And we're reaching the end. So this is the last poem. I've read it out before, the rest for the first time, so thank you for that. This one's very special to me. It's about my mother, amongst other things, but isn't everything about our mothers and other things? 1. Child of the twisted tongue, of milk and honey, child of vinegar and honey, of open waters, of no man's land and every man's soil. I am told there's nothing more selfish than a childless woman, all this bounty yet nothing to give, as if this body was meant for distribution, as if it were ever really mine. Child of the snake's garden, of Eve's fall from grace, of woman loving woman, of all that is gold and gaudy and excessive, of shrugging in the face of subtlety, of modesty, of swear words and clenched fists, of my mother, soft like I'd never be, patient like I refuse to be, brave like I strive to be. Men tried to hold me in their teeth like they did with her. She gave me a skin so thick their jaws ached for days. She kept all her power in a little red box. I carry it under my tongue. I am arrogant. I am selfish. I am nothing like my mother. I am nothing without my mother. I bathe in rose petals. I speak to myself so tenderly because if I don't, then no one else will. I am trying to love myself from the outside in, a reverse exorcism. I have slept in the lion's den. I have been compared to mud. I am fertile soil. I am pink petals. The moment someone forgets, I become the thorns. I am made of cement and pollen. My mother gave me the materials to build a temple, but the instructions to find God. My mother is not soft with herself. My mother does not have the choice to be. My mother stands for hours. My mother's bones are too loud and then too quiet. My mother still sings as she cooks, chopping okra, feeding boys, pretending to be men, but she's saving the best pieces for her daughters, singing Chinna Chinna Ase, Chinna Chinna Ase. I must be a storm. My mother wasn't allowed to get her feet wet, to be wild. I must be loud. I scream, I bite, I wrench open my jaw for every time she was silenced. I carry her power under my tongue. She kept it perfectly intact in a little red box, never once opened. She was saving it for her daughters. She was saving her daughters. Thank you. Thank you, really. It means a lot to be able to share myself and be vulnerable with all of you like that. Again, this is for my mother, this is for all of you, and this is for me. Shameless self-promotion, if anyone is interested, please find me after a show. It's $4 to $6 sliding scale. That's a great question. Kay Nilsson, who is about to come up next, I believe. I do take Venmo. That's an excellent question, Diana. But yes, thank you so much. This is such a valuable space. I'm honored and humbled to be here and to share it with all of you. Keep doing the work, and let's keep learning and growing and healing. So next up is Kay Nilsson. Give it up for him.
How's it going, everybody? Hey, my favorite professor is here. Shout out to Lucia Cantero in the back. What's up, 305, stay fly. I'm gonna do 2 poems and then I'm gonna do some stand-up comedy, y'all. We're gonna get weird tonight. I'm excited. Are you ready to get weird? Okay, but first we're gonna get kinky. Are we ready for that? Great, fantastic. This is called Praise Song for the Flogging. Praise be to the sting, to the thump that barrels the back. Praise be to the wrist that snaps you into the shadow of God. Praise be to the funeral poppies that bloom beneath your graves. Praise be to the pliant moan. Praise be to the stifled church pew. Praise to slackened muscle. Praise to the intimacy carved from the skin of another animal. Praise the hydra mangled to fit inside of a closed fist. Praise be to the body that accepts and hums, body that accepts and buzzes. Praise be to the punishment. Praise be to having earned it. Praise be to this church of the confessional. Praise be to God cold to the top of the flesh. O song uncanned by the body and poured by the mouth. Praise, praise. Thank you. Is this mic on? Hello? Great. So in the meantime, that was the poem about flogging, which is, we got weird. That's cool. Okay, so this next poem, since we're gonna be doing it about sex, hooked up, and dating, I don't know if y'all have ever heard a poem of mine about a particular act, and it's politics. Shout out to Anju Kasturiraj for being incredible every time. That was beautiful, by the way. Okay, how many straight guys do we have in the audience tonight? Straight guys, where you at? All right. If this poem is about you, I hope your friends shame you. Let's just talk about that. So this poem is called Dear Straight Men Allergic to Eating Pussy. Also, FYI, this is slam poetry. You gotta snap. If you like what I say, Say, go in, poet, don't be nice, be nasty, you know, say some things, interact. You're not captive. We're engaging together. If you don't like my poem, speak to me after the show. Thank you. Okay, dear straight men allergic to eating pussy, I know you're tired of us having this conversation in private, which is why I'm addressing you in front of your girlfriend. You say pennies, tuna, the leftover of any fish market left to swelter in the heat. Out of context, it sounds like you are describing the bottom of a garbage can. Curdled milk, fruit rotting inside of a closed jaw, not the part of your lover's body that could flower against the mouth. Question, are you like really, really sure you're straight? Are you like attracted to women as people, or would a fleshlight with a skirt on do it for you? Hashtag masculinity so fragile it's broken by the very soil that birthed it. What is it that scares you the most? Is it the taste? Really? Or is it the thought of her writing your face into breathlessness? Hashtag hero's death. I have another question for you. Does this conversation make your dick feel lonely, anxious, ignored? Imagining a sex act so devoid of your own physical pleasure must be so boring. And here, I must remind you that only 30% of cis women can reach orgasm via vaginal penetration alone. This means that by a very modest estimate, you've disappointed at least 70% of the women you've been with. So imagine what she must feel like, orgasmless and alone, when you say you won't eat pussy but you want your dick sucked. Did you know that you sound like the patriarchy finishing in its own mouth? Do you think that dick tastes like roses? It doesn't. Dick tastes like fucking dick. And you are such a jizz mop, I don't even want to tell you what you're missing, but your girlfriend complained to me last night, so let me explain something to you. Eating pussy tastes like my lover's moans. Eating pussy tastes like having your head squeezed so hard by a pair of thighs you've got to wonder how Drake ever made it out alive. Eating pussy tastes like worshiping in the temple you were raised inside of. Eating pussy tastes like loving your partner enough to help her open up a small universe inside of herself. Eating pussy tastes like I love you, I love you, I love you. Eating pussy tastes like sex so good you wipe your mouth, then lick that hand clean. I told you we're getting weird. Dear fuckface, I know you stopped listening the moment I stopped addressing your penis directly. But once all the laughter dies, I want you to imagine every lover you've ever had tell you that your body disgusted them. Imagine if your body was the joke. Thank you. So I'm gonna do a very short stand-up set. So is this too loud? Am I too loud? Is this good? This is good. This is good. Yeah. Feedback. Wonderful. So can you all do me? Can you close your eyes? All of you, can you close your eyes? Close your eyes, please. Please close your eyes. Can all your eyes are closed. Don't make me call you out. I know what jacket you're wearing. So raise your hand if you watch porn. No one is looking. Everyone has their eyes closed. If you watch porn, raise your hand. Okay. Now, keep your hands up. Okay, no one's watching, I promise. So if you pay for porn, keep your hand up. If you've never paid for porn, put your hand down. Okay, so it's me and one other person. Fantastic. So me and you, bud, against the world. Support sex workers. It's important. But it's kind of difficult trying to justify on a college budget spending $20 for a 15-minute porn video, even if it's your favorite video ever made. But I figured I could get it down to like 50 cents an orgasm, so it's a really good budget item. So how many people feel depressed immediately after having an orgasm? Anyone? Great. Also honesty, appreciate it. You can go open your eyes now, thank you. So speaking of being depressed, my mother called me the other day, and I told her that I was depressed, and she told me that when she was 17, she still didn't have any running water, and so I should really think about my priorities. See, Latina moms are awesome. Latina moms, do you have any Latina moms in the audience tonight? Whoop whoop. All right, cool. So Latino moms are great, they're awesome. They can also be total assholes. I know this because my mom is wonderful and also a total asshole. So I called my mom up the other day because I was in this fancy photo exhibition of like queer Latinos, and I sent my mom this picture, and I'm so proud of myself. And I thought I looked so handsome, and I sent the picture to my mom, and she immediately calls me and says, I hate the way your face looks in this picture. She's like, your face is fat, your neck looks too big, and you look like a 35-year-old Puerto Rican man. My family's Panamanian. My mom doesn't even like Puerto Ricans. It was really fucked up. So I kind of feel bad for my mom, because I think my mom is the only straight person she knows. Like, my mom's mom is gay. Like, my grandma's like a lesbian. Like, super, super gay. And like other people's grandmas love knitting and like being nice to you and cooking. My grandma likes blood sports and Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. So my uncle's gay, my mom used to be a dancer, so she's just been surrounded by gay people all her life, and I am a bisexual trans man. And so I feel a little bit bad for her, but I mean, it could be worse, you know? It could be my cousin Enrique, right? Enrique sucks, I'm sorry. I'm bisexual, which means I'm half gay, which is kind of weird sometimes. I'm also trans. I'm kind of straddling the middle of a lot of things. Being trans is really weird because strangers ask you a lot of stupid questions. Like I went back home for break, and one of my mom's friends asked me where my boobs had gone. And so I told her that I just got up one morning and they were missing. They were just gone. I don't know what happened. You should really look out. They're coming for you, I promise. Being trans is also really weird because strangers want to ask you about your genitals all the time. And it's never the strangers you want to have ask you the question. It's never when someone asks you and you're like, I'd love to show you later. It's always someone you despise, just on contact. But another weird question I get is, do you have a dick? Which I find to be insulting because I have 7 of them. I got them all at Good Vibes. Shout out to Good Vibes in the back. I should own stock there. So, being bisexual is weird, mostly because I sleep with guys. Women, I'm really sorry about that. Straight women, bi women, I apologize on behalf of men. I'm experiencing this too. I'm in solidarity. It fucking sucks. So it's really weird. So I was having sex with this guy one time, and we had some great daddy boy play going on. Everything was wonderful. And we're like in the middle of sex, and out of nowhere he just goes, are you gonna take this big white dick? And I was like, no. No, I will not. See, but the problem, I wish that's what I would have said out loud, okay? See, the problem is that we live in Donald Trump's America, and I just don't have the emotional energy to leave at this point. So I just timed him. And I just figured he'd had 2 minutes to wrap it up. Here's the problem, though. During these 2 minutes where I'm trying to, like, be there and not be there simultaneously, I'm sure other people have been there, too, he doesn't realize that my dad's actually a white guy, and he's dead now. So this story has layers to it. And during these 2 minutes where I'm just doing my best to just be there, I just keep hearing my dead father's hospice just buzzing in the back. Oh, it's funny, come on. I just keep hearing it buzzing in the back, and that's the moment I realized that $20 for a 15-minute video is a fucking steal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anju and Kay, for your performances. Anju, your individual perspective is powerful and valid. Kay, you are always wonderful and hilarious. We are so thankful to have both of you here with us tonight. Once again, we are thankful to the Jewish Community Center of San Francisco for bringing Leah Fessler to talk tonight. Leah is a journalist presently working at Quartz, the Atlantic's sister site. Leah's writing on sex and relationships has also been published in The Atlantic, The Washington Post, and Mashable. Leah graduated from Middlebury College in 2015 with a degree in English and American literatures with a concentration in creative writing. As an undergraduate, Leah saw something contradictory and complicated at play in the sexual culture among her peers, and instead of learning to live with it, she dedicated her senior thesis to uncovering the truth about what, if anything, her generation gained from hookup culture. For her senior thesis, Can She Really Play That Game Too?, Fessler surveyed more than 300 Middlebury students, professors, and alumni, and interviewed 75 to discover whether young people, and young women specifically, were actually enjoying or benefiting from hookup culture. The folks at JCCSF wanted to bring Leah's empowering story to USF to provide an impactful forum to dive deeper into the issues of campus sexual politics. Welcome, Leah Fessler.
Gotta sit down. Sorry, I've been in the booth for a year. All right, first off, can we have another round of applause for Anju and Kay? You guys were fucking fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. This is a tough act to follow. Thank you to UCSF, especially, and JCC, Maggie and Stephanie for bringing me here as part of this Global Women's Rights Forum. I'm honored to be here and excited to talk about sex and all of the complicated things it entails. As mentioned, I'm Leah, I'm a writer, but honestly, I'm the same as all of you in terms of, where we are in life. I graduated from Middlebury less than 2 years ago. You might have heard contradictory and difficult things about Middlebury in the media recently, but I hope we can have an open conversation still. And yeah, so I just want to make it clear that, I'm coming from not a place of authority, but just from a place of, being a student recently and seeing difficult things in the environment around me and just wanting to have open conversations about them. I still have just as many questions and uncertainties as probably many of you do. And I just want to make that clear because what I'm most excited about in this event is to be able to have an open discussion afterwards and share, all the different places that we come from when it comes to sex and sexuality and relationships, because those intersections are what's going to make this event really a powerful learning experience for all of us, I think. And it's also my first time doing a lecture, so I'm a little bit nervous. But I also want to, be clear off the bat that as you might be able to see, I am a white, straight, cisgendered woman, and I come from a socioeconomically stable environment, and I went to an elite liberal arts school. All of these things entail, extremely privileged elements of my identity, and certainly shape my experience in ways that may feel unrelatable to other people, which is completely valid. And I think it's important to call this out early on. Because these elements of, my identity and many of the people that I spoke with for this research inevitably shape our experience. And it would be naive to deny that within mainstream hookup culture, there is not a racial and erotic hierarchy, because there absolutely is. And so, especially in a culture that exalts drunk, non-committal, and dangerous at times sex, this is obviously going to be exclusive to many people, and it also often feels exclusive and dangerous to many women. And so I just want to clarify that off the bat, because I think the essence of what we're going to be talking about is exploring, the differences in our vulnerabilities and our insecurities and our experiences. And so that's really what I'm here to do today, is just be vulnerable with you all about my experience, and whether you relate to it or not, we can have discussion about the underlying emotions and things afterwards. So cool, now we can begin. So my story when it comes to hookup culture and sex starts, a little bit before Middlebury. I grew up in a suburb outside of Boston, and my friends and I were, moved pretty quickly. People were having sex at an early age, drinking at an early age. And while this was all fine and good, I came from the background of being in a monogamous, loving, kind of, obnoxiously heteronormative chick flick sort of relationship in high school. I literally told my boyfriend I loved him for the first time under the stars on a beach, which I had planned. So that gives you a little bit of background in terms of being a romantic, which I absolutely would not deny that I am. But buried underneath that from an early age were a lot of sexual insecurities when it came to, the first times having sex. My parents were super open, my family was open about this sort of thing, but it just didn't feel good, and I just didn't get it. So from a very early age, I kind of developed this understanding that there was something wrong with me, not that there was something wrong with the relationship or the communication. And so this also directly contrasted kind of a feminist identity, which for me was deeply rooted in sexual liberation and the idea that, you know, women should enjoy sex, the physical element as it is, which was primarily penetrative vaginal sex, just as much as men do, which, as Kay so eloquently stated, that's just an absolute bullshit. But anyways, this became particularly troubling when I got to Middlebury. So contrary to my expectation that I would find a respectful, loving, progressive new boyfriend with like the perfect amount of facial scruff and from the perfect background, none of that happened. Immediately, I was awash in what was supposedly meaningless fucking, seemingly like everywhere I went. From, you know, Middlebury's hookup culture, sorry, I can't see this. Relationships were few and far between. It was kind of something that was reserved for upperclassmen, and sexual escapades became a social currency of sort. It was what we talked about, you know, on Sunday mornings over breakfast. It was kind of how a lot of our friendships were built. And it was the best way, whether this was, you know, a dance floor makeout or whether this was someone that you had gone home and slept with, the best way to be vulnerable and try to get to know each other, which I realize is super messed up in and of itself. But that's kind of how it went, and it didn't take long for me to realize that my romantic desires for commitment were not only unrealistic, they were laughable. And so I did what I thought everybody else was doing around me, and I tried to play the game. I tried to enjoy supposedly meaningless sex and not get emotionally involved. And importantly, this wasn't just because of social pressure. It wasn't just because I thought people around me were doing it, which is, I think, what the narrative oftentimes when we talk about hookup culture is. For me, I've always been a very independent and self-driven person. For me, this came from what I believe to be a really misguided feminist identity, in the sense that I thought what it meant for me to be liberated and for me to be independent was to pursue casual and meaningless sex and to enjoy it in the same way that it seemed like men were able to and what I assumed my peers were able to. Ultimately, I kind of thought about, you know, that this is what generations of women's movements before me had worked to earn, and it was an abuse of power to not be able to take advantage of that. But unsurprisingly, this didn't go as planned, and while the media often paints hookup culture as kind of a bacchanalian fest of one-night stands, what I frequently found myself in, and what I found my friends found themselves in, is kind of what I would refer to as pseudo relationships later on, in which we would frequently sexually engage with the same person for, you know, repeatedly over a course of weeks or months, without explicitly discussing romantic feelings or emotions. And so, you know, we would go on walks, we would watch Netflix, we would text incessantly, or Snapchat, and have sex a lot, and usually have sex until the mail came. And so for me, despite, you know, guys' confidence that, you know, the sex was awesome and it was going really well, it continued to be extremely unfulfilling for me. It was honestly terrible, and it seemed as if like the more and more I had sex with people, I should be getting better at it. And I talked to my friends, and it seemed like my friends were also confirming that, you know, oh no, it is good for me. And I kind of sensed that there was something under that, but people didn't talk openly about it. And it got to the point where I even went to the campus nurse one time, which is something that I've written about, and literally asked if I had a clitoris, because I did not understand. I thought something was physically wrong with myself, which is humorous, but also just like not funny. Anyways, ultimately these relationships came to a screeching halt with something called what we refer to as the talk. Is anyone familiar with what I mean when I say the talk? What I mean when I say the talk is like when you've been seeing someone consistently, but you haven't actually talked about what it is, and you receive a text message that's like, yo, I think we need to talk. And you immediately think, fuck, this is the end of my sexual life. And so frequently that happened, and, you know, we'd meet, and it kind of followed a script that my friends and I began to refer to as quite literally a script, where they would sit you down and you'd have small talk, and then they'd go on to proceed to list everything that was fantastic about you. You're beautiful, you're intellectual, you're inspiring, you're smart, you're driven. I'm like, oh, this is great. But you obviously knew that at the end of it was gonna come, and like, you're everything I want, except I don't want you, and I don't want to be in a relationship, and I am not ready for a relationship, or whatever it was. And so it became extremely predictable, but at the same time, I couldn't seem to shake the fact that every time I was really emotionally damaged by it. I felt terrible. I felt like another time I had been kicked when I was already down. And I wouldn't admit that. I would usually nod along and say, it's fine, I don't want anything either. And sometimes when I tried to push back, it just really didn't go well. And so, this happened multiple times. It hurt when it was my best friend that I'd fallen in love with. It hurt when it was the ultra hipster that I had courted in the dining hall because he wore Crocs. It hurt with the upperclassmen that I had honest conversations with, who literally stopped speaking to me when I couldn't get wet during one hookup because of Accutane. It hurt, with a guy who I'd actually become really close friends with and even stayed at his parents' house. And the point is that this seemingly constant rejection hurt, and it hurt badly, and it came even if the person that I was engaging with I quite literally knew was an asshole. And the reason why it hurt, which I so desperately did not want to admit, and which I think so many of my friends didn't want to admit, is that I wanted to be wanted, which is as simple as that. I wanted to feel love. I wanted to hold hands in public and publicly express that I was into someone. I wanted everything, the emotions, the commitment, the romance. And that was not only culturally abnormal, but it was also antithetical to the feminist and liberal identity that I thought I embodied. And so this all came to a head with a guy who I'll refer to as John, which I've written about, who I had been seeing for months after I got back from abroad, which was a terrible dry spell, and I was really, feeling enlightened and cultured and ready to have, a good time. And so we started seeing each other. This is a tall, brooding philosophy major, We would meet up and have deep conversations after drinking a lot about Nietzsche and his thesis and our life goals and our parents and all the intimate details that one would discuss with someone they were interested in. And then we would have sex, and we would have sex until he came, and even if I tried to kind of change it, it just didn't work. Kind of like what Kay was discussing. It's just like you can kind of try to be there in the moment and also be somewhere else, and it just translates really poorly most of the time. And ultimately, this kind of came to a halt with one of these conversations where he was about to graduate, and we had a talk, and later he was hooking up with a freshman 2 weeks later, and I was kind of like, whatever, this is over. But where this got really complicated was, and this was kind of the tipping point that made me write this thesis, is we went, by chance, I ended up driving him to Vermont for a weekend, and we spent the whole time, this was months later, just being friends, not wearing makeup, not wearing fancy clothes, just smoking a shit ton of weed and going to swimming holes and having a good time and conversing like real human beings. And we really got to know each other, and it was fun, and I left and I felt good about it, and we were completely moved on. But then 2 weeks later, I received a call from him when he was back in Boston. I was in New York, and his voice was shaking, and I had never heard him sound so weak. And he said, "I really have feelings for you. That was an amazing weekend, and I realized what a cool person you are and how much potential we have." And I was like, obviously, weird that you didn't see this or try to see this before. But I was like, thank you, this is nice, it's good validation. But then what was really weird is he asked me to be in a relationship, which was increasingly surprising, which I said no to. And then later, when I asked why he was at this point now and not before, he said kind of the phrase that really put me over the edge, which is that he told me I didn't think of you as a human being while we were having sex. And that was kind of just a really cold, hard exposition. Obviously, I hung up the phone directly after that, of the truth, which is that I didn't only despise the hookup culture that I had immersed myself in, but that it had quite literally dehumanized me, and it had dehumanized my peers, and that I had let it dehumanize me by cowering from what I really wanted, which was connection. So I realized that these lies that we had told ourselves about the importance of feeling nothing and the opportunities that we had missed by denying ourselves intimacy and forbidding vulnerability were just absolutely contrary to anything that I thought to be feminist or anything that I thought to be liberation. Living in a constant state of pain and rejection, lack of orgasms, far from anything that I would identify as a strong and independent woman, honestly, at this point. And so this is the moment that I decided to focus my senior thesis on women's experiences with hookup culture at Middlebury. I decided I would figure out once and for all whether my friends and I were stuck in the 1940s with our desire to feel actual connection and love, or whether other people were out there suffering from the same feelings. And so I sent out a post on a blog that I ran, expecting to get a couple responses to see if people were interested in coming and talking about their sex lives. And within an hour, I had over 70 slots filled. And then for the next 6 weeks, basically served as a therapist in residence at Middlebury, sitting in our student center and just listening to people come and talk. I didn't even have to ask any questions. I just say, like, well, how's your sex life? And people were just desperate to just unleash everything that they had felt, their insecurities, their experiences, their relationships, their lack of relationships, their feeling completely excluded from this culture at large, or pressured within the culture to be something that they didn't want to be. And this was at once baffling and at once painful and at once tremendously encouraging. I spoke ultimately to 75 students and surveyed over 300, and at a student body of about 2,500, it was a pretty significant sample. And the results were simple in a sense. The overwhelming majority of men and women that I surveyed and interviewed felt exactly the same way that I did. So I'm going to read some statistics of what I found. While 74% of the women that I surveyed had engaged in frequent or occasional non-committal sex or hookups while they were in college, and this is a statistic that aligns with the College Online Social Life Survey, which is, it surveys 20,000 students nationwide from 22 universities, and also found that exactly 72% of students hook up at least once by senior year. Of this 72%, only 13% of them only engaged in one-night stands, which means that the vast majority of people around me were also engaging in what I was calling pseudo relationships, or repeatedly sexually engaging with the same person without explicitly discussing their feelings. But impressively, only 8% of the students that were engaged in pseudo relationships reported being happy or very happy with their experience. And while the vast majority of interviewees and survey respondents thought that their peers preferred casual hookups, which was also represented in this national survey, in which 70% of peers thought that their friends and their peers only wanted hookups, 100% of my female interviewees and 75% of my female interviewees and male interviewees, and survey respondents stated a clear preference for romantic relationships. And so this was also supported by the national survey that found that 80% prefer to be in a relationship by next year. And so ultimately, what I realized here is that women were consistently sexually dissatisfied by hookups and rarely experienced orgasms in casual sex, which is something that we recognize as the orgasm gap, that, less than, as Kay said, less than 30% of women can orgasm from vaginal penetrative sex alone, and we like to say, for misfounded biological reasons, that that's a difference in anatomy, which is not a difference in anatomy, as proven by a survey that I recently reported on for Quartz. Lesbian women actually orgasm just as much, nearly just as much as straight men. So what this is actually a difference of is caring about your partner's pleasure and focusing on it. And so this is astonishing, and it's really sad to see that so many people were in the same position that I was. And when I take a step back, I realized that women were eager to build connections and intimacy and trust with their sexual partners, but instead, almost all of them found themselves going along with hookups that induced overwhelming self-doubt, emotional instability, and loneliness. When people reflected on the most satisfying parts of their relationships in interviews, or their sex lives in interviews, they talked about the eye contact that happens right before you kiss somebody, or the brief fleeting moments of connection when you hold somebody after you've had sex. And this is beautiful, but at the same time, it just evidences how fleeting these moments were in people's sex lives and how incapable they felt to talk about them with their partners. And it's important to note that the men I spoke with also struggled equally as much, though in different ways. And I think when it comes to straight men, they infrequently feel comfortable talking about this, but really I've found an incredible opportunity in which many of them actually opened up to me about these insecurities. And it turns out that they felt this constant social pressure to prove themselves through sexual prowess to friends, which is a result of toxic heteronormative masculinity, which predicates male power and confidence on sexual domination and the ability to distance oneself from traditionally female attributes like emotions and love. So all of this leads me to the primary, conclusion of my research, which is that, as I wrote in my thesis, in hooking up, we saw a glimmer of hope. We saw potential. We saw the only, if not the most accessible means of taking a step towards what we really want, something more, commitment. Call it pathetic, but call it true. In reality, by performing or convincing ourselves that we enjoyed casual sex because we thought it's what white men or our peers actually enjoyed, which was proven to not even be true as a stereotype, we were unconsciously bolstering a patriarchal narrative that women should not take agency over what they actually want and what they actually desire sexually. We were entrenching ourselves further in patriarchal suppression. Meanwhile, we were existing in a constant, push and pull of a stereotype that wasn't even true underneath what everybody truly wanted. So this ended up being a game in which nobody won. Yet, as I reflect back on this experience, I realized that it's not necessarily commitment that myself and so many of my peers craved. It was something simpler, and it was something that was kind of rift in that experience with John, which is that we wanted to be treated like human beings. We craved these elements that are essential to sex, but they're also essential to any human interaction with people that we have any semblance of care for, which are intimacy, emotions, and vulnerability. And this is a lesson that I actually learned through recent research amongst the BDSM and kink community, in which I've talked to close to 70 people globally about their experiences with communication and intimacy in BDSM and kink. It's been tremendously enlightening, and I would love to talk about it more in the Q&A. But through this experience, what I've learned is that what we, meaning myself and the vanilla people that I was interviewing, did not realize is that the emotions can be divorced from sex is completely asinine. That cuddling or checking in with one another and discussing what went poorly or what went well after a sexual experience does not necessarily mean that you're falling in love with a partner or anywhere close to it. It means that you care about the other person as a human being, and that the experience, whether romantically charged or not, was intimate, and that is okay, and that it's good. And this is the message that I think I and many of my peers, especially those involved in vanilla hookup culture, need to hear. Vulnerability, intimacy, and open sexual communication do not need to equate to romantic commitment or even romance. That may not be what many of us want right now, and it may not be what many of us want in the future. But until we start talking openly and explicitly about our sexual desires, until we start recognizing that affirmative, open, negotiated consent makes sex more pleasurable as well as safer, and until we realize that caring about our sexual partners as human beings with inevitable emotion, regardless of whether romantically involved with them in any way, we will continue to have less pleasurable, potentially dangerous, and frankly boring sex lives. The key isn't necessarily to find a partner willing to commit to you monogamously or officially. The key is finding a partner, obvious as this seems, that cares enough about you as a human being to respect your pleasure, your boundaries, and your emotions. And yes, for some of us, this is going to be awkward and weird and uncomfortable at first to, tell somebody quite literally, like, I like when you lick my clitoris in this specific way, and I don't like when you jackhammer me in the vagina. But bringing such vulnerability and such humanity to our sex lives will result not only in a hell of a lot more orgasms, but also in healthier minds, bodies, and spirits. And as feminists and as human beings, we owe it to ourselves to be vulnerable. And this is where I'm going to close out. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope we can continue Q&A.
Leah, thank you so much for that inspiring lecture. I have absolutely no doubt that other people in the room were able to relate to your experience like I most certainly did. I'd now like to welcome Anju and Kay to join Leah on stage as we begin our Q&A portion of the evening. We would like to highlight a few of the norms that we practice here in the cultural centers at USF and incorporate them within the space this evening. This room is what we like to call a brave space, which means that we'd like to acknowledge the lived experiences and opinions of everyone in the room, while also ensuring that people remain accountable for what is being said. We'd like to highlight the differences between intent and impact and recognize that while intentions may be good, sometimes that isn't always perceived, and we'd like to remind the audience to remain mindful of how their words may impact others. Additionally, we would like to discuss, confidentiality within the space. We are sympathetic to the fact that the nature of the discussion may be upsetting for some due to its intense subject matter, and we would like to highlight the importance of confidentiality. We honor that there may be victim survivors of sexual violence in the room. To ensure audience members feel safe sharing their stories and comments, we do not plan on following up directly with anyone who shares about their experience related to sexual violence unless there is clear danger to self or others. We also want the audience to be aware of our Title IX office and the resources the university has for anyone within the USF community who may need them. These can be found through the My USFCA website when you search for Title IX. At the cultural centers, we have a saying, "What's said here stays here, but what's learned here leaves here." We'd like for everyone to absorb what is said and take the knowledge back out into their communities while respecting the privacy of those who choose to share. I'd also like to highlight that at this point we're going to be turning off the camera to ensure the privacy of those in the room.